You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong.
Welcome to episode 172 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me is owner of the Georgia Virtue, journalist, TV personality, dog mom, Jessica Szilagyi.
I feel like you're teeing that up for a reason.
No. Other than you did share some of your mean tweets today, or last week, or whenever it was.
Mean tweets. I love how, that's just great.
Oh yeah, it's great. I want to call your boss. You're like, good luck. I own the company.
Yeah, I'm like, you can call me.
Yeah, I'm going to call the Better Business Bureau.
Yeah. Joke's on you. We're not a member. Good luck.
What's she going to do? Give you 1 star for journalistic integrity?
I don't know, but someone was like, I don't know if it was Ken Pullen or someone. It was someone in the subthread of where this all was taking place. It was like, what's she going to do? Call your mom next? Which be hilarious because my mom is like way more savage than I am at times. So. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Look, the apple did not fall far from the tree on that one.
Yeah.
What's funny is everybody has this image of you as being mean and gruff, and you're one of the sweetest people I know.
Well, I think that has to do with your age and the fact that I take the community service approach with you.
Just a sweet old man. Either that or we get along because we're both the same kind of mean.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate.
Well, it's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's a dong on a drone. Yes, I said dong. Best story of the week. Thank you, Eric, for sharing this with us. So
credit where credit's due.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I assume Eric was looking up drone stuff, not marital aids. But the opening line of the article, this is on Vice, is nobody expects a flying dildo. Albuquerque Sheriff Manuel Gonzalez III, whose campaign for mayor was dramatically interrupted at an event last Tuesday by a large sex toy attached to a drone.
It gets funnier every time you read the story because it sounds like I thought I had to read it all the way to the end because I thought it was satire.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was totally expecting this me to look at the source on it and it'd be the Babylon Bee or something like that. Nope. Vice puts out some dicey stuff, but they're a legitimate source. The drone hovered toward Gonzalez as he was answering confrontational questions from a member of the audience, and it provoked nervous laughter from the crowd of about 70 people. I got total respect for this. He could try to continue on with his speech. Nothing to see here, folks. It's just a pecker hovering above you.
What choice do you have?
If you're a skilled at improv and quick-witted, you go ahead and you talk about it. Instead of playing victim and all that stuff. But it's a hilarious video. The Twitter account is Dongcopter505. And you don't actually hear a speech in it. You just see this quad drone with a marital aid hanging from the bottom of it, just kind of flopping around as it hovers around the sheriff running for mayor.
It's terrible.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. The sheriff Gonzalez accused his opponent of coordinating it, and so the guy tries to go get his drone back. Someone snatched the drone out of the air when it got close enough to the ground, snatched it, and threw it down. So the guy goes to retrieve it. And at that point, he is accused of hitting the sheriff in the hand.
Is that a crime?
It's very weird because I didn't see any interview with the dong pilot, but it's totally plausible because I've done stuff like that too. Is because I talk with my hands as I'm gesturing with my hands now. And I smack the mic. I've been known to smack the table, that kind of stuff. Because I talk with my hands, you would think I was Italian. So it's totally possible that he was making a point and forcefully was and touched the sheriff. But he's got like some misdemeanor battery charge on him, which I think is going to go away. But the guy, his name is Dreyer, says that he's not working for the opponent. He doesn't like any one of them. And guess which party he claims to be a member of?
Which one?
That's right, the party that has a candidate with a boot on his head, Libertarian.
Nice.
But it's totally libertarian thing to do, isn't it?
Fly a sex toy at a candidate?
Yes.
I
Yes.
can't say that has ever crossed my mind, but
Now it has.
well, I mean, no,
You're just gonna have
no.
dildo dawned drones flying around Screven County.
No. Not happening. People talk enough about me. I'm not gonna.
Well,
Tee it up
you'd have to
with
have a
them,
registered drone pilot, and I'd have to be Eric. So, speaking of peckerheads and sheriffs, we have an update on a story we covered. Kemp has suspended Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill.
I guess I have to eat my words a little bit because I didn't think that they would be very impartial because one of them was a sheriff. However, it was the sheriff on the committee was from Burke County, Alfonso, and people freaking love him, and he's pretty by the book. But anyway, the committee recommended to Kemp that there were conflicts, that Victor Hill should not continue serving pending, the court stuff, and so
This is the guy accused of strapping a minor to a restraint chair. Mm-hmm. And so common that it wasn't even a discussion with the deputy. It was just one word, chair.
And there's 4 pre-trial detainees that this supposedly happened to with the chair at some point. Again, pre-trial, like they hadn't done anything to warrant it other than maybe being mouthy or.
Look, it's one of those things where I get the inclination. If you've got somebody who you're convinced is guilty and they're being a jerk, but you have to be a professional. You have to be better than everybody else. You have to be above it. You have to be above retribution.
Well, that's what you're elected for. Like, you're elected to be the bigger person.
Right. And look, we've talked about before with no matter how bad a fight is, in this case with a deputy, you've got somebody running, trying to get away, and it comes to a fist fight. The minute the cuffs go on, it stops. You put your hand on their head so they don't bump it going into the car, and once it's over, it's like a football play. The whistle's blown, it's over. You're not a punisher. So anyway, we covered that 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it is. That's a good suspension. I mean, unfortunately, he'll continue to get paid.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, well, and the federal court system, it could take 2 years before he actually sees inside of a courtroom.
I hope it's not that long, but Jim Beck hasn't seen anything, so.
Exactly. And Beck may be dead before he actually gets a court date. And of course, COVID helps snowball all that.
I certainly appreciate your optimism. It's helpful.
I'm just a ray of sunshine, aren't I? Mm-hmm. So, speaking of ray of sunshine here, Georgia's High Court finds man not intellectually disabled enough for death penalty exemption.
Yeah, the story or the ruling from the Georgia Supreme Court came down last, I guess, Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day holiday. And it, I get the summaries of the rulings, and it prompted me to go read the whole thing, and it's a really upsetting case. Like, so this guy, Rodney Young, he is in prison, obviously. He was sentenced to death for a March 2008 murder of his former girlfriend's son in Newton County. And he was indicted for malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and burglary. He went through the trial. They found him guilty. They said that they did not believe he had an intellectual disability. At that time, our state still referred to it as being mentally retarded, which kind of
it's uncomfortable to read, but that is, as you quote in the article, that is the legal definition of what they were using. So that's not you throwing that word around willy nilly. And I know people don't like the word, but that is literally the word that is in the law.
It is, and we have since changed it, but because of the timing of, like the fact that this started before the law was changed, there's several references to it in his filings by his attorneys, and then also by the Supreme Court justices in their opinions. And so, and they repeatedly made references, like they made a huge point to point out that, that's what happened, but it's, you can't go back and retroactively change court documents like that. So anyway, he, even at his original trial back in 2008, they brought forth evidence on the defense side that said, that Young had been in special education courses. He was classified as mentally retarded by his school, and therefore to do that, when he was tested, he had an IQ test, he would score between a 60 and a 69. And there was testimony that he'd struggled intellectually in academics and in sports. But the jurors at the time said, well, there was no expert testimony regarding his alleged intellectual disability, and they didn't present any actual IQ results, so we're not going to take that. And as a side note for me, like, that's really a thing of ineffective counsel. Like, the jury is holding, I don't know, I think that's a terrible reason not to. And then another part of that is that the state presented testimony from an expert who did not evaluate Young, but said that these are some of the character traits that a person who has an intellectual disability has, and these are character traits that someone who does not have an intellectual disability has, and he spoke generally, and so the jury took that as, well, he's an expert, and that's that. So in 2012, which is amazing to me, 4 years after the crime occurred, they found him guilty and sentenced him to death. So just like as a background, because we were talking about this before the show, a lot of times people on death row get a bad rap for like dragging out the process and just filing things to slow the process down. But he actually filed for a new trial a month after he was found guilty, and again in September 2017, and again in April 2019. And it wasn't until June of 2019, so over 7 years later, that they finally took the case and like put it on the docket and started the procedural process with the Supreme Court in Georgia. And then they just heard it in March. Granted, we had the delay because of COVID, but still, like, that's an incredibly long process that was mostly out of his hands. So,
well, the ineffectual representation, I don't blame the jury on this one. You cannot assume facts not in evidence. So that was that defense attorney's job, was to present the best case to save his client.
I disagree. The state had an obligation to prove that he was not mentally retarded, quote, or intellectually disabled. The state had the duty to prove that that was not the case.
Oh, absolutely. The onus is on the state, but that defense attorney really, really dropped the ball on it. From what it sounds from reading it. I obviously wasn't at the trial, wasn't privy to everything that the jury was privy to. But
well, obviously it's accurate because you read it on the Georgia Virtue. But
well, absolutely. I mean, the chick that owns that usually puts out some good stuff. Mm-hmm. But this is something that should have come up immediately, if not during the trial itself, during the sentencing phase. And again, we're talking about what's average IQ now. 90.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about somebody who's you go much below 60 and you're not functioning. So I think 70. The line is at 70. You get much below 70, and you have a hard time functioning in society. But the fact that the defense attorney never brought this up during the sentencing phase, during the trial itself. And, you have a note here, and it's obviously a note in the story on the Georgia Virtue. No one is asking for this guy to get let out of prison.
You're right. He's not said, I didn't do it. His attorneys aren't saying I didn't do it. They're just saying, please commute this sentence to life in prison. Now, what really upset me, and I read, so the ruling is by Justice Melton, who's the one that's retiring. He was the Chief Justice, and it was 126 pages, and then there was a special concurrence, and then also a dissent. So there was a lot of opinion on this, and I don't like Justice Melton. I'm glad he's retiring. I don't agree with most of what he says or does, and so I think I'm not a fan of him. But one of the other justices who wrote the concurring opinion, he said specifically this. I felt like this. He has done this before, like in his opinions, he has stopped short of directing the legislature to do something, but has pretty much said, like, you need to do something. Because we are the only state in the nation that requires a defendant to prove their position of being intellectually disabled beyond a reasonable doubt. Everyone else is just beyond based on a preponderance of evidence. We're the only state that has a standard that high, and the standard is so high that no person ever has fallen into the exemption of the death penalty because of it.
That's a strong statement. And
it's true.
I mean, no, I agree, but it's a strong statement. We're the only state that puts the onus on the defendant to prove beyond or the convicted person to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you're too mentally
They're not even
limited.
convicted yet, though.
Well, that's true.
And so the same constitutional protections apply, and not only that, but like let's just be real about it. Why even have the standard if Georgia is just okay with putting intellectually disabled individuals to death? Like, if you're going to say that you have a standard that is so high that no one can reach it, and that if anyone is on that line, we're just going to go ahead and put them to death anyway, just say that. Don't make these people go through these ridiculous hurdles of trying to, So anyway, Melton said that, we're relying on our previous decisions to uphold Georgia's standard of proof. There's nothing unconstitutional about it. Yes, other states have it's clear and convincing evidence standards in the other states, not preponderance of evidence. I'm not thinking of the right thing, but clear and convincing. But, well, I guess it's similar to this. I don't know, but it's not the same. There's just everyone else. He acknowledged that everyone else was at a lower threshold, and basically said, like, which I understand that when another ruling, like, I understand that this is the entire problem with precedent. These people relied on the Ray Cromartie case for some of their justifications in denying Rodney Young's motions for new trial or to have a commuted sentence or to strike this as unconstitutional. That case was flawed. Like when Ray Cromartie was put to death, there was all kinds of evidence that was excluded. The family, the victim of the family, or the family of the victim, they were all objecting to him being put to death. But they relied on the rulings in that case to make the decisions on that. In my opinion, that was one of the worst cases Georgia ever had when they put him to death in November 2019. And we relied on how we got to his final days to make the case for this one, even though Cromartie didn't have any intellectual disabilities. And one of the worst things that I feel like they decided, aside from whether or not, he was intellectually disabled enough, is that they just rely on, from a procedural point of view, that there's no problem, that it's not unconstitutional from a procedural point.
Well, and that's exactly, how Cromartie ended up meeting his demise it was purely procedural. Well, we can't possibly consider this because it wasn't filed on time. If I don't know if you've ever read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but he pokes fun at this sort of thing with one of the species of aliens of being procedural, that everything is done on a form, that they can do whatever they want to you, but everything's got to be done on what this form, that form. You wait in line. So it is scary the way the state puts people to death, and it's just a procedure. And I can't consider anything that's not filed within a certain time frame. Can't consider this because we don't have beyond a reasonable doubt. But we can show through this man's entire life that he has always been and always had problems with cognition. That he was in special education classes. It doesn't mean that everybody in special education is a 60 IQ, but we can show his entire life that this has been a problem. So you have all this evidence to say that he didn't get to prison, get the death sentence, and then start saying, "Oh no, I've got all these disabilities. You can't possibly do that to me."
So I don't want to skim over the justice who what I said. He stopped short of directing the legislature, but what he said in his opinion was, Young and his advocates are also welcome to try to persuade the people of Georgia through their elected representatives to revisit Georgia Code 177131C3 in light of extensive developments in the science of intellectual disability and the law in this area since the statute was enacted more than 3 decades ago. If the General Assembly takes a further humane step with regard to criminal defendants who are potentially intellectually disabled, I would embrace that change. Like, that says everything.
Well, he says, not on me, man.
Yeah, but it says everything about what we have in place.
Right, but you're going to die, but don't worry, we'll fix it in the future.
Yeah, because it's a procedural thing.
And Kemp, of course, is going to be running for re-election, so he's not going to commute the sentence.
He can't.
Can he not?
In Georgia, that's why Ray Cromartie was put to death. Only the state board of pardons and paroles has the authority. Now, if I had been Kemp when Ray Cromartie was facing those hours, I would have removed every person on that damn board until I found people who would commute his freaking sentence. But Kemp does not have the authority under Georgia law to stay in execution like that.
Well, it's disgusting. And look, and nobody is saying let him out of prison. No one is saying he should ever walk free again. All they're saying is we don't kill people who don't understand what's going on.
So Justice Bethel was the one that wrote the dissenting opinion. And he said, we have learned that states are not authorized to enforce legislative rules or judicial tests that by design or operation create, quote, an unacceptable risk that persons with intellectual disability will be executed. The question before us then is whether Georgia's requirement that a defendant prove his or own intellectual disability beyond a reasonable doubt creates an unacceptable risk that an intellectually disabled person will be executed. Here, the existence of such a risk seems plain.
Yeah, he said what I did, but really, really smart.
Yeah, but why couldn't? What's wrong? What's wrong with his friends?
Man, I don't know. I don't think we're going to see a change in the law anytime soon, because there is no appetite with lawmakers to do that. Because as soon as you do, the Sheriff's Association comes out, and we hear they're soft on crime, they're soft on crime, they're soft on crime. I would be shocked to see it change legislatively. Shocked. It's gonna take a watershed moment for that to happen, and I don't know that. And it's really hard because you talk about, he's convicted of murder, and as soon as you say that, people shut down, voters shut down, and all you're going to see on a campaign flyer is that state rep so and so voted to take murderers off death row, soft on crime. They don't stand
but
for
at
law
least
and
they
order.
could look at themselves in the freaking mirror.
No, I agree with you. This difference between wanting to be elected and being principled. Not to mention, it would never get past the speaker. It would get shut down immediately. It would never make it out of committee. God, we got to replace Ralston.
Well, if he runs for Senate.
Oh, from your lips to God's ears.
I'm just scared he might win.
Yeah, but he can't do any damage in the Senate. He'll vote along party lines, and he can't do any damage. He won't be in leadership. He's what, 68 years old or something like that.
Not old enough.
Yeah, most of the people up there are going to have way more seniority than he does. And I understand there's only 100 senators, so they get more committee assignments and stuff. But he's not going to be a committee chair or anything else anytime soon. If he's 68, you do 2 terms at 6 years each, and he's 80. So he could do far less damage to the state of Georgia as a senator than he can as Speaker of the House. Because he has entirely too much power. Plus, if he goes to the Senate, all those cases that he's been sitting on, they all go to trial. So I mean, he would not be my first pick, but the fact that he would have to step down from his House seat in order to do that is would be preferable, and there's a good chance he wouldn't survive the primary. I don't think he's in any position to run a statewide race. He's got the money. I don't think he's got the notoriety. He's not likable. He's not attractive. He's not overly well spoken.
He sucks.
Yeah, he's a disheveled fat old fart. And he's going to be running against somebody who's well put together, well spoken, wrong on most things, but presents very, very well on the Democrat side, and whoever else runs on the Republican side. I think it would be tough for him. But if his ego is pushing him that way, Godspeed, Mr. Speaker. Good luck. Now, on the tail end of that tirade, this is a good time to remind you that these are our opinions and not those of anyone not on the show or any respective company for which we may work, own, or otherwise associate ourselves with on a regular or irregular basis. So we have the opposition, and we've had this on the show for a couple weeks on our outline, and never had the time to give it the deep dive that it deserves. Opposition to critical race theory intensifies in Georgia. If you don't know what critical race theory is, or CRT, is by definition seemingly comes from the Education Weekly. Quote, an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that racism is a social construct and is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies.
But it's important to read the tenets of it because, I think a lot of people are reading headlines and seeing, 2 and 3 minute sound bites on pundit shows. And I'm not saying those discussions aren't good, but the tenets of it are more alarming to me than the definition or the concept because...
Well, we have recognition that race is not biologically real, but is socially constructed and socially significant. It recognizes that science, as demonstrated in the Human Genome Project, refutes the idea of biological racial differences. Then we have acknowledgement that racism is a normal feature of society and is embedded within systems and institutions. C, a rejection of popular understanding about racism, such as arguments that confine racism to a few bad apples. And lastly, recognition of the relevance of people's everyday lives to scholarship.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter, if you say, well, I'm not racist, or I wasn't raised racist, or I don't see color, and they don't care about that. These critical race theory believers, they care about the outcomes, because it's the unintended but foreseeable consequences of choices.
Right.
It's a verb, not a noun.
Man, this is all sorts of convoluted and messed up. So even though you are not a racist and you don't treat people differently based on
your beliefs,
but you're inherently racist because that's just the way society is. And this is the way liberalism has succeeded in this country. And this goes back to the 50s and 60s, and all the way through the 70s, where classic liberalism embedded itself in education. When a lot of conservatives were going out and going to work and stuff like that, they were going deep into the education. History is what we say it is because we put it in the books. That you could take these little skulls full of mush and mold them because you spend more waking hours with your teachers than you do with your parents. Particularly if you've got working parents or a one-parent household, something like that, you get these little skulls full of mush that get to be shaped 8 hours a day or however long they're in class, and then if they're good, you send them off to college, and then they really get locked away because you don't see your parents, but I don't know, once a month you go home and do laundry. So you're surrounded with it and influenced by it. Sorry, Jess.
No, so there were some examples in some of the research that I had set aside about what they consider to be the, inherently racist, I guess, verbs of critical race theory happening around us. But so the 1930s example was that government officials drew lines around areas deemed poor. Financial risks often explicitly due to racial composition of inhabitants. Banks subsequently refused to offer mortgages to Black people in those areas. Now, single-family zoning that prevents the building of affordable housing in advantaged majority white neighborhoods and thus stymies racial desegregation efforts. Those are not apples to apples at all, first of all. And second, I am the last person who will ever advocate for zoning. I hate code enforcement. I hate zoning laws, but I have watched government meeting after government meeting, and not once has zoning ever been about anything other than my property values.
Property values and tax. We just got our proposed tax bill. And that's really the drive from government on zoning. It has nothing to do with affordable housing. It has nothing to do with the people that are coming in. It is 100% about raising the value of the homes so they can collect more tax. And they'll openly admit that in meetings. Is we need houses that are 300,000 plus, because that's the whatever the number is, but that's the breaking point in which the average household has a neutral impact on county services, whether it be schools or parks or whatever else. So these municipalities, it's money driven. And as far as redlining goes, I coming out of the Army, I went into banking. That's been gone for quite some time. And look, what redlining was is you looked at areas that were poor credit risks. And you say, well, I'm not going to put a branch in that area because it's a waste of money. I can't lend to people with 500 credit scores. But the Fed has gone complete opposite to where you have the Community Reinvestment Act, CRA. Banks can't just close branches. If they can lose their charter, they can lose their ability to expand. Banks they can't. Even if you change the hours of a branch location, there's a bunch of hoops to jump through to justify why you're changing the hours. Or you were open 6 days a week, so you had Saturday hours, but now you want to eliminate Saturdays. There's a bunch of hoops to jump through to make sure that redlining doesn't happen. It has institutionally changed. And I can't blame bankers from the 30s for not taking poor risks on credit.
You mean after the Depression?
Right.
I don't understand. I don't know.
Well, yeah, are you going to go and put money into something with very little upside and tons of downside? Well, you are if you have a branch system of 2,000 branches and you want to be able to expand to 2,500 branches and go expand into other states and be involved in mergers and all that stuff. The Federal Reserve puts a gun to the back of the banker's head and says, no, you will service this community. So I'm not coming out saying that I'm absolutely for redlining, because it's an outdated concept because so many people are transient now. Areas that I never thought would come back. Kirkwood in downtown Atlanta was a crack neighborhood, and some investors went in there, started flipping houses. And putting some lipstick on those pigs, and they flipped those neighborhoods, and they started having nicer houses. So what we think of traditional redlining just doesn't exist anymore, because you can have a $1 million home in the same neighborhood as a shack, particularly in the city centers, like in Atlanta, Edgewood, same thing. So redlining it doesn't exist anymore. To even use that as a justification for why institutions are racist is absurd. A bank doesn't care what color your skin is. They care you're green. That's all you are to a bank. You're green. How do I make money off of you? I want to pay you this little interest and take your money and lend it to that guy at a margin of 4%, whatever margin they're using. That's all a bank cares about. Sorry, Jess.
No, I'm with you. And, to me, it kind of resembles the what we talked about last week with the socially disadvantaged farmers. Yes, did those things happen in 1930? Yes. Does it look bad on paper? Yes. But that's not what's happening right now. I mean, the number of programs that are available, like you said, and the way that our banking system is operating right now is so it's a mirror in it.
No, absolutely. It doesn't happen anymore. Underwriters, and I was probably the last generation of banker that actually had lending authority in my own office. That's just not the way it's done anymore. Everything's done with central underwriting. That underwriter has no idea what race you are. To that underwriter, you are a debt to income and credit score. That's it. Are you a good credit risk? Your DTI is at 60%, debt to income is at 60%. Well, no, this person can't afford another loan. And that's all they're looking at. They don't look at where you get your income from. So you don't have to disclose separate maintenance or child support or anything else, but is not considered when it goes into the computer program. The fact that you are getting child support or you're on a welfare program or anything else doesn't come up because the computer systems that we use now. I say I've been banking for a long time. But the computer systems don't take that into consideration. All that gets wiped, and all they see are the numbers. They don't. The name is irrelevant. They see your Social Security number, your income, and your debt service, and that's what the decisions are based on. Period. It doesn't matter if you're from Iran or you came from Screven County, Georgia. It doesn't matter. The bank has no way of even looking at that. Because the banker that you sit in front of when you fill out the application isn't the person making the decision. And I assure you, I at no point as a branch banker calling underwriting and say, hey, let me tell you what this guy looks like. Mm-hmm. It's just not a conversation that happens. And, Connie is still in banking. My mother was in banking. I was in banking. These are conversations that do not happen. But even if somebody has some deep feelings or whatever about a certain race, they sure as hell don't discuss it.
But it's unfortunate that, so the argument right now is that critical race theory is not being taught in schools. Now, and that, Trump had the executive order prohibiting it and prohibiting contractors and just entities in general from talking about divisive concepts on race or sex. But we all know that individual teachers have these types of conversations, or when given the opportunity, the conversations come up. And I kind of hold the position that's a risk you take when you send your child to public school. You don't know what you're getting. Every public school system is different, and it depends on the students that are in the classroom. That said, it's not an irrational argument to be concerned that we're teaching children that, something that happened in the 1930s is still happening today when it is just not.
Look, you need to be teaching kids how to balance your bank account. Soft skills. The importance of showing up on time when you go to a job interview. How to dress needs to be taught in some of these programs. They need to be teaching math, reading, critical thinking, science. The core knowledge that every functioning adult needs to have before they get out of high school.
Well, you get into the conversation of the uselessness of some public schools, especially when they're not teaching those things. But I guess the question I have is what do you do when you have a school that is truly diverse and you have, 50% of the families want you to teach this and 50% that don't? What do you do?
That's where critical thinking comes in. Is allowing kids to express their opinion on things, is depending on the class. And obviously, as they grow more towards being a senior in high school, and then moving on to college, if they're going to go to college, or moving on to trade school, or moving on to working, is allow them to have the conversation but it needs to be had with context. It needs to be factual context. This was back in the 30s. Nobody who was denied a loan in 1930 is alive today to be impacted by it. That's 90 years ago. And it's okay to teach that redlining happened, but you also have to teach what we did to correct it and what the society did to correct it and why it's no longer viable.
Right, but what I'm saying is when you talk about the one that's like present day about the zoning and the single family home standard to keep, majority white neighborhoods white. What do you do when you have a diverse district and part of the district thinks that that is exactly what is happening and part of it doesn't? What do you do?
You have to teach facts. This is an opinion that counties use zoning. The fact is, counties don't like apartments because of the load on the school systems.
But to play devil's advocate, you can easily say that it's an opinion that it's not happening for that reason. I mean, consider the MARTA conversation. How many years have North Fulton neighborhoods opposed MARTA coming to their neighborhoods?
Well, that's true. But that's a conversation to have, but it does not need to be in the curriculum. And these are conversations that are better had at the college level, where you've got kids who are a little more mature, and they can have honest conversations and talk about this stuff. This is definitely not something that needs to be taught in public schools. You
think college kids are having critical thinking conversations like this?
It depends on the college, I reckon.
Some of the dumbest kids I've ever met coming out of college. They have absolutely no skills other than to hit play on TikTok.
Yeah, cram for a test, pass a test, and the knowledge just leaks out of their ears.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess,
but the idea is that a kid at 20 or 22 as a senior in college is going to better be able to process the information and have a conversation on it. Than a kid in middle school that's having this crammed down their throats, and their lifelong opinion being shaped by it for the next 70, 80 years. It's an indoctrination. But it's also one of the reasons that I prefer a private school model. Let parents shop the schools that they think best fit their values.
Yeah.
But we have critics like the Heritage Foundation recently attributed a whole host of issues to CRT, including the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, the LGBTQXYZ clubs and schools, diversity training in federal agencies and organizations, California's recent ethnic studies model curriculum, the free speech debate on college campuses, and the alternatives to exclusionary discipline. It's a mouthful.
Yeah. I guess I just one of the biggest things I don't understand is why so many people are having an opinion on this. I agree that it's a controversial topic from whatever side you're coming at it from. If you think that these things are rampant in our communities and they're not being talked about, you're passionate about that. If you think that it's all a bunch of horse manure and you're outraged that your child is being subjected to it, I get it. I see both sides of why everyone is so heated about it. But people are meddling in this that have absolutely no, Chris Carr and 19 other attorneys general. Who cares?
And then we have Kemp, who penned a letter to the Department of Education a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, which, he basically said, I've talked to people and they don't want this. And so I want you to oppose the Biden administration's, push to use tax dollars to push this agenda. And, the State Board of Education, like we're not talking about the DOE, we're talking about the State Board of Education is a bunch of political appointees. And the day we recorded this last Thursday, the Board of Education actually met for a special called meeting to publicly issue a statement opposing to publicly oppose critical race theory, which is hilarious to me because you're talking about a board of people who were appointed by the governor, and the governor put out a statement saying, I hope you are against this. And so then they voted to be against it. And then he sent out a press release and was like, look, they're against it and I am happy about it. Like at that point it's posturing and you're not accomplishing anything. The fact that the State Board of Education is against it and that Brian Kemp is against it have absolutely no bearing on what happens.
Right. And the problem I have with that is trends are cyclical when it comes to politicians. And we may very well be looking at a Governor Abrams or somebody from her school of thought. And she gets her own appointees in there. And they reverse course on it. I don't like governance by edict. But, our state lawmakers are getting involved too. We have Senator Michelle Au. All right. Quote, fact, systematic racism has shaped the history of this country. Facts are nonpartisan. But the suppression and distortion of facts and creation of culture of boogeymen to message on that distortion may well be.
What?
Yeah, I read it verbatim.
Yeah.
And look, there's nobody is saying that that our history hasn't shaped the country. And I think we're better for it. For having the intestinal fortitude to look back at our history and go, man, that was wrong. Jim Crow was wrong. And we can look back and say that. But this idea that you have a permanent victim class in this country is not productive to the country. It's not productive to say it's not your fault. It's because of a policy from 90 years ago that you're having troubles. And this goes back to the earlier statement that this is about results driven instead of opportunity driven. That it takes out individuals' desire and willingness to work hard and do whatever, that you are permanently a victim.
And I appreciate that they're honest about it. I mean, truly.
But it is a tough conversation for us to have, and I'm not unaware of the irony of the two of us talking about it.
Yeah, but I don't understand why. Like, I understand what you're saying, but at some point, that just has to be ignored because I'm impacted. Like, this theory is dictating my beliefs, like, and the world that I live in. They're saying that I am not capable of living any other way than the way that they have defined.
Right. It's a victim mentality that I don't accept. It's like the cartoon that makes its way around, and they change it from time to time. And you see a guy on a bicycle, and he sticks a stick in the spokes, and then falls over and blames somebody else for it. Just that I am the master of my destiny. I am a culmination of my experiences and my choices. I cannot exclude the advantages that I've had in life with good, hardworking parents that taught me the value of hard work. I understand that I'm a culmination of their hard work, the first 18 years that they were trying to keep me out of prison. But I'm a culmination of my experiences and my choices. Were they all good? No, of course not. I was an idiot. I'm still an idiot from time to time. But all those choices, all those experiences shape who I am, not the randomness of how I looked when I was born, which was stunning. I was a stunning child.
Well, the irony is that they say there's no biological difference in race, but then constantly discuss white privilege and all these things that supposedly make us inherently different. And
right. Is say that there's no difference biologically, but you're wrong because of how you were born. Look, I don't remember making that choice. I don't remember before I was being born picking out which parents I was going to have. We don't have any choice in that. All we can do as individuals, and that's where liberty-minded people like you and me come at it, is it's up to the individual to make your choices in life, to better yourself. We have volumes of stories of people in this country that were born disadvantaged and pulled themselves up by their bootstraps to become something. Colin Powell, for one. I mean, if you've ever read his autobiography, it's amazing. I mean, he came from a poor background to be the one of the most powerful men in our government. Certainly, the most powerful man in the military. It is a great autobiography, by the way.
Yeah, you're endorsing it.
I am. It was a very good read. It was a good read. When I read, I read for information. I'm not a big fiction reader, even though I did reference Douglas Adams before. That's because I'm a nerd. So, Jessica, do you have any closing thoughts as we're in danger of running long?
No, because yours is positive, and I feel like I should defer to you to.
I want to wish a very happy 56th anniversary to my parents. If they could raise 4 heathens like us and stay together for better than half a century, obviously they're doing something right. Or my mother has Stockholm Syndrome. I don't know. So, for Eric Cumby, our editor, for Jessica Slodgy, my partner in crime, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.